Welcome to our presentation about statutes. Excuse me. Let's begin. So here we are on Canvas. I'm going to scroll down to our section. It's called Module 7, Constitutions and Statutes. Before we begin, I'm going to show you the resources that we have available on Canvas for you. This statutes PowerPoint is what we're going to be spending most of our time with. We'll look briefly at this United States Code titles. You are not required to commit these to memory by any means or even know any particular number associated with any particular topic. You do need to know they exist, and that's how we have our federal laws organized. And then this is just a general FYI. I'm not going to offer any test questions over this. We have a section about how to read a statute, and this is the one that I'm expecting you to be familiar with. The others are just if you're interested in diving a little bit deeper, but this is the one that is fair game for tests. Here we have rules of statutory interpretation. Again, this top one is the one that you're responsible for. It's one that I've written. I borrowed liberally from other sources. And these are two additional ones if you want to do a bit deeper dive. And here's an example of a statute. We didn't actually do this one in class because we weren't in class, but I pulled this from a different semester. You may recall during the first week of the semester we covered capital murder statute. And so if you can remember those resources, those tools, maybe pull out your material from the beginning of the semester. Coupled with this, you'll get some exposure to the process of reading statutes. Reading statutes is a skill, kind of like riding a bicycle or making a cake. I can tell you all day long how to ride a bicycle, and you won't know how to ride a bicycle until you get on the bicycle. It's a skill that you develop by doing it, not by sitting and listening to somebody else do it. And so looking at these resources can kind of help you make a little bit of progress on it. I guess the first thing I would say with statutes is it's hard. Everybody agrees it's really hard to understand a statute. You really have to spend a lot of time making sense out of it. And you have to really dissect it, almost like you've got a frog that you are taking apart, and you're going to have to see where's the muscle, where's the bone, all the different parts. And knowing how they fit together can be really helpful in understanding it. So go back to your notes for that first area of the course where we're talking about capital murder. Those will be very helpful in making sense of this material. Okay, so we're going to dive into the statutes PowerPoint at this point. Here we go. I'm going to go back to the beginning. Here we go. Sorry about that. Here we go. So when you pull yours up, yours may say Unit 3. It's the same deal. I've tweaked a little bit of the PowerPoint, but in large measure, it's the same PowerPoint that's posted. So where will you find information? You have Chapter 7 of the textbook. Listen, some people love learning from textbooks. I'm one of them, so I freely admit it. If you find the textbook valuable to you, awesome, wonderful. I am very pleased. If you are not a textbook person, I've kind of designed this course so that you can do pretty well in it and you never have to crack open the textbook. You need your blue book and your green book, but you can get a B in this course and never open the textbook. Probably the A students are reading the textbook, but to each his own. We all have our commitments and things along those lines and our priorities. So absolutely you can read your textbook, but what I don't want you to do when you read the textbook is leave thinking, oh my gosh, I have 50 million things I have to commit to memory. I have to learn all of this. I'm not going to test you over stuff that I didn't talk about in these videos or I didn't post in the Canvas. So don't feel like you'll see we'll get to some stuff in a couple minutes where there's extensive discussions in the textbook about. It's lovely that they talk about it at length. I'm not going to test you over it. And so the textbook is a little bit dangerous territory because it goes into more detail than I'm expecting. I just wanted to flag that for you, but definitely not discourage you from reading. So when do we think about statutes? I would say it's probably one of the very first things we want to think about when we begin a research project. Sometimes your boss may say to you, there's a statute, and may tell you kind of where to find the statute, which is awesome. Sometimes your boss may not know if there is a statute, but very possibly he or she will know whether it's likely if a statute exists, whether it's a state statute or federal statute. be sure to ask, is there a statute? If the attorney isn't sure if there's a statute, if there is a statute, it would be state or federal. They'll know that information, or very likely they'll know that information. And so that will give you some important starting points. Y'all are on a team. So you going out there and trailblazing on your own without all the information the attorney has is not a good investment of your time. It's not a good investment of your client's money. And so you want to ask all those questions of the person who's going to have a bit more experience in this area. But sometimes the attorney may say, I don't know, or there may be a statute, but you're probably also going to have to look at cases. And so then you're going to want to figure out, well, how do I find the statute? There's, I would say, kind of 3 ways of finding it. One is to look literally in the USCA or Vernons, which we'll talk about in a second, the actual statute books, and see if there is one. That's a fine idea. That's especially helpful if you're pretty sure there is a statute. For example, if you practice in the area of family law, or you practice in the area of criminal law, it's pretty codified. Those are pretty codified areas. And so turning immediately to Vernon's makes a lot of sense. If I'm practicing bankruptcy law, very codified, I'm just going to go to the statutes. But if I'm practicing tort law or contract law, most of that area is common law. And so I'm probably not going to try to find a statute because I already have a pretty good feel that there isn't likely to be one. Maybe I'm going to be surprised, but my going in kind of assumption is, I don't think so. And so in that situation, if going through the statute book doesn't make sense, the next thing I'm going to probably do is look in a secondary source. Look in some source that's going to tell me about that area of the law. It may be a treatise, it may be a encyclopedia, legal encyclopedia, and those resources are going to point you to the statute if one exists. So that's a very helpful resource. The third place, and honestly this is the place where I found most of my statutes, is actually in cases. Because if a statute is on point, then the judge is going to talk about that statute in the opinion. And so when you're reading the cases, be on the lookout for statutory references because those are going to be really important. Now, of course, the judge can't talk about a statute that wasn't passed into law at the time that the judge issued his opinion. So you always have to make sure that you're looking at the latest and greatest cases. And so that might be an additional reason why you'd want to look at the most recent cases to see if there's perhaps any recent statutes in this area. A fourth tool, and I know that said there's just 3, but there really is 4, is the key cite approach. That's when you check to see is a particular statute, is a particular case been superseded by statute. We saw that in our key cite lecture when I pulled up the Lilly Ledbetter case, and we saw that the key cite system actually told us, oh no, there's a federal statute that has overturned this particular holding. And so that can be a third way to figure out where the statutes might be. So those are 4 good tools in addition to the assigning attorney to help you figure out where those resources are. And we'll play around with some of that stuff later on in this presentation. I'm not going to show this in class. I tried to show this, and this is a video for those of y'all that are younger than me, which is virtually everyone. When I was a child in the, I guess, late 70s, maybe mid 70s, there was only Saturday morning cartoons. And so kids all got up really early on Saturday morning to watch the cartoons. And I was one of them. And the commercials between the shows were obviously directed toward children, and one of them was this kind of public service announcement from a place called Schoolhouse Rock, and they published these commercials, little animated things that talked about parts of speech and also some civics. And one of the things they did was, I'm just a bill. And it was a little song, and I'm a terrible singer, but here we go. I'm just a bill sitting here on Capitol Hill. Anyway, it goes on and does a whole singing thing, and it explains the process by which a bill becomes law in the federal system. The state system is pretty similar to that. You're welcome to watch this. You can just Google it and just Google "I'm just a bill." You might add the phrase "Schoolhouse Rock" and it will come up. But I'm not expecting that you understand the ins and outs of it. What I hope that you'll get out of the video is really two things. First of all, it is a long process. And it requires a lot of effort and a lot of negotiation within the various parts of the Congress and also with the president or the chief executive officer for that particular state. The second is that most bills don't become law. It's a very uphill process. And even bills that do become law are almost always amended by that process. So it's not exactly the same bill that started. Anyway, that's all I'm expecting you to get out of it, but it's a little bit entertaining. Okay, this page is kind of, I feel like I'm required to tell you this stuff, but nobody actually uses the stuff that isn't in highlight. These items down here in bold are what we commonly use because we use these tools before the internet. It would be silly to use these tools to get the most recent statutes when they're waiting for us on the internet. We can either go to the government's website, or we can go to Lexis or Westlaw, or we can actually go to Cornell Law. That's another website. There's probably 50 others, but these are ones that you can have a lot of confidence in. So you're looking for a newly passed law, you want to get it. This website is good. Thomas is referring to Thomas Jefferson. This is Lexis. This is a government website. You can see the GOV. We have Lexis, we have Westlaw, or you have Cornell Law. Those four places you can have a great deal of confidence in. I'll show you the place in a few minutes where to get Texas statutes. So let's say though you want to use books. We have a library on the Spring Creek campus that has a lot of the books, a lot of the statutes, or I guess really all the statutes available to us. And the version that we have is the USCA, and that stands for the United States Code Annotated. Nobody says all of this. They say USCA. It's a West product. And the key word here is annotated. The A is key because it lists all the statutes, but most of the book, I'd say 80% of the book, isn't statutes. These are these annotations. And most of the annotations are cases, opinions that have issued that are related to a particular statute. Because even though you have a statute that's on point, you're still going to need to dive into the cases that have interpreted that statute. This is because it's published by West, a private company. This is not the official code for the United States. The official one is United States Code, USC. But you can see it's missing an A. It doesn't have all those lovely cases in it. It just gives you the statutes. Statutes are cool. Don't have any problem with the statutes. But the annotations are at least as important as the actual code. I think most of us would say more important, to be honest with you. Lexis has a similar service, USCS. Um, it, it's not as famous as USCA. So I think most people, this is almost like Kleenex or Band-Aid. It's almost a brand name that we use to speak about the whole genre out there. Cornell is a really neat website. I will go there in a few minutes, but it doesn't have annotations. It will just give you the text of the statutes and regulations. So as I said before, the USC is the official one, but it doesn't make it any better, and it's not a better idea to quote from the official code than one of the non-official codes. We don't have the USC. It's pretty rare for a library to have both the USCA and the USC, and most libraries are going to want to have the USCA. So statutes are arranged in these groups called titles, which are another word for it would be codes. Let me just show you an example of that. I have an example here. Labor laws are all grouped in Title 29. So let me go back to Canvas here. You can see we have in Module 7, we have the United States Code titles. Again, you're not committed to remembering these, but you can see Title 29, labor law. So all the labor laws are grouped together. Let's go back in a time machine to say 1800. How were statutes back then? Well, they were arranged chronologically. So you might have a labor law next to a criminal law, next to a family law, next to a law relating to contracts. They were arranged by the order in which they became law. So in a legislative session, obviously you're going to handle lots of different issues. That system was okay when you had a relatively few number of laws, but you can see in the federal system, let me just go back, but this isn't even all of the code. This is just a few volumes of the code. It would be a crazy system to have to go through each one of the volumes to find a particular law. And that's especially relevant because what you'd find is if these weren't arranged thematically is that you'd go to this particular year's code and it would refer you to a law back here, which would refer you to a law back here. I mean, it would just be this very difficult process to actually find the law. And so as a result, at some point, both the federal government and the Texas state government codified the laws, arranged them into topics. And so now all of the laws on a particular issue, such as labor law, are going to be grouped together, even though the laws in this section were passed over many decades. And you can see the law about patents would be here. Again, sections of this might be hundreds of years old in terms of the difference in age between one law and another, but they're all going to be grouped together. And it's a similar system that we have in Texas. So when you are using the book form, in other words, these burgundy books, you can't see it here, but I'll show you in the next slide what the pocket parts look like. A pocket part is a little insert that goes in the back of the book that you always need to check because it could be that since your lovely bound books were printed, there's been a change in the law. I mean, you don't get a new set of bound books every single legislative session. That would be so hugely expensive, especially since, 99% of it hasn't changed. And so what they do is they'd give you these little pocket parts. And you can see here, this is the pocket part. It's inserted, there's just this little sleeve in the back, and this little insert has a little kind of, not cardboard, but like a manila folder type flap that can slide into that sleeve. And then this, you can pull it out and look at it. And of course, the first year after the USC or whatever is issued, this pocket part is really thin because there's only one legislative session you have to worry about looking at the pocket part for. The next year it's a little bit thicker. Next year it's a little bit thicker. And eventually they get so thick that they don't fit in the pocket part anymore without breaking the spine of the book. And so the pocket part, putting it in quotes here, air quotes with my fingers right now, the pocket part is actually separate from the book. So here, this volume here, the pocket part for it is seated right next to it in the shelves. And so this means that there isn't a pocket part in the back of this book. And that's just when a book is really maybe 10 years old or something, where it's quite old. So this is a pocket part, and these are pocket parts. So let's talk about the Texas system. We call Texas statutes Vernons. And you can see here in cursive it says Vernons. A little hard to read. That's a colloquial term. And what people will say is, did you check in Vernons? They won't say, did you check in the Texas statute? So you do need to know that when people talk about Texas statutes, they're going to likely call it Vernons. And that's just our name for it. And in fact, it's kind of silly now because West publishes Vernons, but they've kept the name on it. So probably for another generation, people will continue to call it Vernons even long after the publishing company Vernons is no longer in any way connected to the Texas statutes. This is a link if you don't want to use the Vernons, the paper version, which are black with gold lettering. You can go to this website, and we will be visiting this website later on. There is a link to it on Canvas. So we'll be checking out the statutes. The only difference between these two are that this is annotated. This is going to have, as you can see here, Texas code annotated. This is like the USCA. This is going to have all the cases on it. This website is like the USC, but just for Texas. It has all the statutes, but it doesn't have any of the cases. And so this is of less utility, but it's free. And so there's certainly some utility to that. Okay, so now we're going to visit some of those websites that I told you about before. Here we're going to go, this is to that Thomas website. Here you can go and look at the various bills being proposed, and you can search through them. It's not the most user-friendly, most viewed bills, and give you various information. So if you're doing some legislative research or some lobbying work, this can be very helpful. But again, it's not a requirement for this course that you do much of a dive in here. Okay, and now we have, this is Cornell Law. Remember I showed you before that list of titles? Well, here we have it here, and you can see, let me just scroll down. Number 29 is labor, so you can click on it and drill down and get more specificity. Let's say you're interested in the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is the minimum wage law. And we can click here and say minimum wage, and click on this and find out what the minimum wage currently is. And here we have okay, so this is our current minimum wage. You can see what you do is you look at March 25, 2007. So this is going to begin 24 months after this. So March 25, 2009, and then you add 60 days beyond that. So about July 23rd, I'm guessing, 2009 is when we got the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. And that is this is the current law. So that quickly showed you how to find that. That's one resource. But Cornell gives lots of different information. I'm going to go, the organization within Cornell Law that has this is the Legal Information Institute. And you can find the regulations. This is regulations. You can find Supreme Court cases. You can find Texas statutes. Here, we could drill here. I wouldn't recommend using this for Texas statutes, but this would be a resource. Actually, they're going to take you to this website we're going to go to in a few minutes. So that saved us a couple of clicks. Okay, so when we were looking at this, let me go back here. I showed you this website. Well, this is the same website, okay? And so here you are in the home section. So let's say that you were interested in finding out about, is there a statute about informal or common law marriage? So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to go down to family law, click on family law. Then I'm going to go to look at the various categories. As I look through them, and there are a lot, the one that looks most relevant is going to be the second one, Chapter 2, the marriage relationship. Obviously, it would take you longer to look through it. Since I know where I'm going, I'm doing it quick. I'm interested in marriage license, application for license by minor, proof of identity and age, absent application, affidavit of absent applicant. Keep on scrolling, keep on scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. And here we have proof of informal marriage. Okay, and now I'm ready to go, so I just hit go. And this is the statute on proof of informal marriage. We'll go back to this later on. I just wanted to pull it up and show you kind of how you do it. Another way of doing it would have been to go to search and type in informal marriage. Of course, you need to spell things correctly. So, and you can see that it's going to take me right here to informal marriage. It also might show some other places to go. But probably most of us in everyday conversation calls it common law marriage. And if I were to type that in, I'm going to get lots of stuff, and I'm probably not even going to get, I'm going to get, let's see, family code. I'm not actually getting anything from this section, because this section is a chapter 2. So we can see there aren't any chapter 2s. Chapter 4 is the first chapter. So it's not, if you know what you're looking for and you know the terminology used in statute, it's a wonderful resource. But if you're using a somewhat different term than what the statute actually includes, you may be out of luck. So it's a little bit of a iffy situation from that standpoint. So if you're doing a word search, you do it through search. If you're just going to find it by either you know where it's located in the statute or you're willing to kind of browse through the terminology, then this is the place to go. Okay. So now I'm going to go to Westlaw. This is Homebase, as you probably recognize. I signed on before we began this presentation, and then I hit this button to get us to Homebase. You'll see in this box, the Browse box, there is an item that says Statutes and Court Rules. So let's click on that. So I'm interested in Texas statutes, so I'm going to go over here to click on Texas. And you can see they have each one of the codes be its own subject right here. So I look down here and I'm going to find family code. And you can see marriage relationship, it's that same category that we saw before. So you can see the marriage relationship, the marriage relationship. Let's ultimately scroll down to here, to subchapter E, marriage without formalities. Oops, here we go. So I am interested in marriage, and I am interested in the marriage relationship, and I am interested in subchapter E, marriage without formalities. And so I am interested in this section. You will see that the language in this right here, starting with A through D, is identical to the language here, starting A through D. So the statute itself is going to be the same. But what you're going to see is that there are 354 decisions, and they're broken down over here by what particular fact pattern there might have been. Over here, there are no decisions at all. We go from one section of the statute to another section. So in West, there's over 300 decisions that help you make sense of this language. But on the state website, there's no cases at all. You have to pay for that. That takes a lot of effort, as you can imagine. Westlaw invests a tremendous amount of resources to get all this stuff done. Another thing that you'll see here is it is able to link you from one section to another. This isn't a hard jump, it's just the very next section. But it could be a jump from one title to another. You click on this, you go directly into it. I'm going to go back. Okay, this gives you information about the various and sundry updates that have happened. And we could go over here and look at cases. Let me just pick a title. Cohabitation. So here we have a list of cases that talk about that. So this case, Small versus McMaster, the takeaway from that is cohabitation need not be continuous for a couple to enter into a common law marriage. When man and woman had lived together as husband and wife and had represented themselves as being married, fact that after dissolution of man's previous marriage by divorce, man and woman had spent only 3-day period of time together was not controlling on issue of whether a valid marriage relationship existed between man and woman upon dissolution of prior marriage under this particular statute. And again, you can see these little blurbs that help you decide, well, do I need to look at this case? Oh no, my fact pattern is really different. I won't look at this one, but maybe I'll look at this one. So it helps you quickly decide. And you can see you're getting key numbers with these. This is the one. Okay, so I can find some additional, because this may not be as complete as the key number system. If we go to key number system, you can see here, this says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It looks like there's 9 cases under this topic. Actually, there's also additional topics. Let's just click on this though. I won't be surprised if we have more cases. So we have quite a bit more than 9. So as a result of the annotations, we're able to get some cases really quick, and we're able to get a key number, which is going to open up probably hundreds of more cases that are relevant. You're not going to get any of that here. So if the statute doesn't clearly answer your question, and sometimes it will, you're still going to want to go into a resource like Westlaw to get more of a case. You may have noticed something about this decision. I'm going to go back to the, or not decision, going back to the actual statute. You may have noticed this red flag and thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, you probably remember when we were looking at cases that sometimes we have red flags, and that means that that decision, if we're talking about an opinion that a judge is issued, is no longer good law. So you may think, why are you showing me this case that has been held unconstitutional or preempted? And we're actually given a case here. Well, the reason that this law has been held unconstitutional has to do with Obergefell. You can see here that in the statute it says, in a judicial, administrative, or other proceeding, the marriage of a man and wife, man and woman, may be proven by evidence that. So it uses the term man and woman. Well, you may recall in that Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court said that marriage cannot be restricted to man and woman, that 2 men can marry and 2 women can marry. That's what's been held to be unconstitutional about the statute. The rest of the statute is just fine. So if we just pretend like these words weren't here, we'd be good, and they may use those words somewhere else in the statute, but that's the main point. So let's just flip over to this case and see what was held to be unconstitutional. So again, we are, since we went to this case through the key site, the style or the quote of this case will be in kind of yellow. So we'll be able to see we'll be able to zoom in on the parts of the statute that are no longer considered good law. So this is a same-sex situation. So April Dawn Reynolds, is how I'll pronounce her name, were in a car accident, and I believe that Miss Reynolds died, and she had a common law marriage relationship with Rhonda Hogan, who was legally her spouse under this informal marriage statute. But of course, according to the technical language of the statute, 2 women were not permitted, or because obviously, according to the wording of the statute, it was required that there be a man and that there be a woman, and they were both women. And so the issue is, well, were they really married under this informal marriage theory since they were both women? And so what this opinion is saying is, yes, after Obergefell, you can see it cited right here, ceremonial marriage, like when you have a minister, a rabbi, or priest, or some other, or judge, some other officiant preside over your marriage, those have to have same-sex marriage, but in this case, we also recognize informal marriage as being open to same-sex marriage as well. So that's the only part of the statute that was found to be unconstitutional. So even though we see when we look at this statute that there is this red flag, it's a perfectly good statute. So that's why you have to kind of dive in. Don't look at this and go, oh, so the whole thing was held to be unconstitutional. Not at all. This is still a completely legitimate way. It's just something that is also open for same-sex couples to choose to participate in it. So I wanted to flag that. KeyCite also works for statutes. So let's just go. So this, we just looked at the statute, but let's look up here at the KeyCite tools that we have, because these are the same tools that we used when we were looking at cases. So you can see there are all the decisions, and you can see the notes of decisions, exactly the same number here as we see here, right? So the notes of the decision, but we'll get a little commentary about, maybe we won't, thought we were going to. So I guess we're not going to get any commentary on those. Sorry about that. I lied. We can get some history about the statute. Let's look at the graphical statute. This is the current statute. Let's go back and look for historical statutes. Oh, so here is information about the various versions of the bill. Maybe the first version of the bill had some differences to the last version of the bill. Let's just click on that just so we can see this is Senate Bill 6. You can see why this bill was proposed, and you can see it was part of a larger bill addressing many separate topics. You can see that they were looking at changing various sections of the Family Code. Talking about all kinds of things, mental health and other sections. Let me just do a quick, I'm going to try informal marriage. See if we can find the relevant sections quicker. Okay, let's just do with marriage. Okay, well, anyway, not me with a lot of success here. So this is the starting point. They may not have even included in here the informal marriage part. It looks like they were focused on some other issues here, but eventually this bill was amended to talk about lots of different issues. That was my kind of an example about how a bill starts looking one way. It could be very, very different before it becomes final law. And we have more citing references here. Secondary, here's a decision, various secondary resources. You can see that this is an encyclopedia that we use. Here, let's just go look at this. This is Texture. This is the most common legal encyclopedia we use in Texas. And this might be, let's say that your law firm usually handles, I don't know, wills and trusts. You don't usually handle family law. And you've been asked to research some informal marriage issue, that a person who has recently died was, in an informal marriage perhaps, and you're trying to see, well, were they really or not? This is really outside of your wheelhouse. This is outside of your attorney's wheelhouse. So what do you do? Well, a very good place to get started is texture. So we're going to flip over here. And again, texture are these kind of forest green books. There's probably about 60 volumes in the set if you're using the actual books, and we actually do have a set of these books in the Spring Creek campus, but you can just use it online too in Westlaw. And here it gives you an overview about how you prove up informal marriage, and it gives you the statute. So if you were looking here first and you're saying, gosh, I don't know anything about this, I'm just going to look up the term informal marriage or marriage relationship or something in my texture, and oh gosh, I found the statute. I also found some big cases. One thing about texture is that it's not going to give you all the cases. It's going to give you a smattering of important ones, and many times they will be somewhat dated cases. So it's good to kind of get your big toe in the water to find some big cases. I mean, once you have one case, we saw Small versus McMaster earlier, but you can see instead of getting 50 cases, we're getting 4 cases. And you can see one is super old from 1911. You know, really? And those probably changed quite a bit. Certainly that was well before this matter was codified. So this can give you some ideas to get started, but it's rare that you're going to be able to finish your research project by looking at texture. Texture is a first step that's wonderful, but it's not going to be your last step. It's a little bit like going to an Encyclopedia Britannica, you know, and doing a report about armadillos or aardvarks or whatever. When you're in 5th grade, that's fine. But when you are in college, probably Encyclopedia Britannica being your only source is not going to cut it. You'll need to go to some other sources, but that might be a good place to get started with looking at the issue. So here, again, you can click on this and go to the statute. So that's a good resource. Anyway, so I'm going to go back to the West. So it's going to tell you if there is a major problem. Again, most statutes aren't going to have a red. Let's go to a different section so we can see what it looks like without the red. I didn't mean to click on that again. We'll go to another section. That's what I meant to do. So up here, you can go from one section to another because many times in statutes, one section naturally leads to another section. And you can see this section, which is what the declaration for informal marriage might be, doesn't have a flag at all. Most of the time they won't have any flags, or there'll be a yellow flag. It's very rare for a law to be held to be unconstitutional. Again, this goes through how you record a declaration of informal marriage. Anyway, just wanted to show you that so you could have a comparison experience. Let's just look at the statute a little bit more and play around with it just for a few minutes so we can get a flavor for how to interpret this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the statute, copy it, and plop it down into a Word document. I like, maybe because I'm old, to blow up the font a little bit so it's a little bit easier for me to see, and put it in a more readable font just to get me started. Okay, so the first thing that I see is I have 2 sections, Section A and Section B. So what I like to do is tab in things under that. So B, I also have a Section C, and I have a Section D. And C has some fun. So it helps me see the structure. Here, I'll do another space here and another space here so I'm consistent. I'm going to turn off the formatting. Okay, so in a judicial, administrative, other proceeding, the marriage of a husband or wife, and I'm going man and woman, I'm going to mark that out since we know that's unconstitutional, may be proved by evidence that a declaration of their marriage has been signed as provided in this subchapter, or again, this would be the unconstitutional stuff, the man and woman agreed to be married, and after the agreement they lived together in the state as husband and wife, and there represented to others they were married. Let's look at B. If a proceeding in which a marriage is to be proved is provided by subsection A2, that's this right here, that's what they're referring to, is not commenced before the second anniversary of the date on which the parties separated and ceased living together, it is rebuttably presumed that the parties did not enter into agreement to be married. A person under the age of 18 may not be a party to an informal marriage or execute a declaration of informal marriage under this section. And D, a person may not be a party to an informal marriage or execute a declaration of an informal marriage if the person is presently married to a person who is not the other party to the informal marriage or declaration of informal marriage as applicable. So this section talks about how old you have to be to enter into an informal marriage. And this section says no bigamy, basically. Which, is important. But, and then this gives a deadline when you have to, if you think you're in an informal marriage, where you have to act. But the section that talks about what an informal marriage is and how you go about proving it is going to be here. Now, if you filed a declaration of informal marriage, that's one way. But let's say your client hasn't done that. So the one that you're going to focus on is going to be this one. And so I'm going to put it in bold. The people agreed to be married. So that's step one. Put this here. I'm going to go down here and I'm just going to do one. They have to agree to be married, and after the agreement, there should be a comma here. So I'm going to add it. Obviously, when you're citing this law, you're not going to add comments. They live together in this state as husband and wife, and again, those terms would be unconstitutional because they are gendered. And they're represented, and they're meaning in this state. And of course, the state is Texas. Represented to others that they were married. So there are three requirements. The parties have to agree to be married. They have to live together in Texas after they made that agreement. And they're represented to others that they were married. So this is also after the agreement. So I'm going to repeat that. After the agreement. There in this state represent others that they were married. So these are the three requirements. And you can see they're all ands. So if you have two of the three elements, that's not good enough. You have to have all three. And so this would be the definition of informal marriage. And so there are some issues that kind of come up in my mind. One is, what does it mean to agree to be married? Could that be that you've decided to become engaged? Is that agree to be married? What does it mean to live together? Staying a night in a hotel room, is that living together? How long does the period of time of being together have to be? Does one night work? Does it have to be 6 months? And then they have to represent to others that they were married. How many people? Is one enough? And what does it mean to represent? For example, if I am checking into the hotel with my boyfriend or whomever, and I'm saying, yes, Bob and I are going to spend the night here, and the clerk says, and as I sign the register, I sign Cynthia Groover, and the clerk might say, welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Groover, assuming we're married, and I don't correct him. Did I just represent to somebody that that Bob and I are married? I don't know. Those are good questions. So does it, how, what is the level of communication that needs to be? These are questions that the statute really doesn't answer, but these would ones that very likely the case law is going to resolve. And so in your case, it may be very obvious that 1 and 2 are satisfied. Yes, they agree to be married. They even had a ceremony where they took pictures and invited family members over. And they lived together for 10 years. But the issue may be, well, did they represent others? Well, let's say they didn't invite other people to their wedding. Let's say they did it privately, but they took lots of pictures, and it was very clear that they were having something that looked very much like a wedding ceremony, just the two of them. They lived together for 10 years, but did they represent to others? Maybe that's the point where you're like, well, I don't know what the evidence is. So that's where you'd need to get more granularity and look at the cases to see where that comes down. So that's how we might break up this statute. So let's see if there's anything else that I needed to cover. I don't think so. We will not be having an assignment over this. It's a difficult thing to work on without having had an activity in class. And since the survey results were that people preferred quizzes over assignments, we'll be doing a quiz over this. So just wanted to flag that for you. Since it's not really possible to have an open notes, a quiz that isn't open notes these days, I'm probably going to have it be something that you are reading some material and making some judgments about. So that'll kind of be the style of presentation that we're going to do with that. So again, I haven't completely drafted it or just been kind of thinking about it. Wanted to share this with you, and thank you for your attention. If you have questions about this material, on Thursday I'll be having a class that we can talk through any issues, and of course you're welcome to come to my office hours. I've stopped having a set office hours. In some sense, my office hours are kind of whenever you want them to be because I'm not going anywhere these days. So just send me an email when you would like to talk, and we'll figure out a time that works for both of us, and we'll talk. And I hope that you will reach out, and it gets a little lonely here. So anyway, take care so much. It's a pleasure making this presentation. Have a wonderful day. Take care.